Okay, we're ready to start, and today is October 5th, 2013. Okay, so we start with the salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so today we're taking sutta number 109 in the Middle-length Discourses. This is the discourse on the full moon night. Okay, so this sutta, it's concerned with many aspects of the 5 aggregates, and so it's a very important sutta. Okay, so the sutta takes place when the Buddha was living at the city of Savatthi in the eastern park, not Jeta's Grove, but this is Eastern Park. It's called the palace, or actually it's the mansion built by a woman named Visakha, who is also known as Megara's mother. And so the sutta takes place on the full moon day, or full moon night. It's the Uposatha day. And so on this day, the Buddha is sitting out in the open, surrounded by the monks. And then one monk gets up from his seat, then he salutes the Buddha. He asks permission to ask some questions of the Buddha. And the Buddha says he can do so. Okay, and so the monk begins by asking whether these are the 5 aggregates here it's translated, the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. And then he enumerates them: the material form aggregate affected by clinging, the feeling aggregate, perception aggregate, the aggregate of sankharas, which we'll come to, and the consciousness aggregate. Okay, I want to write the Pali word and then just give a little explanation, because even the original term presents a little bit of a puzzle. Okay, so the term is Panchupadana Kanda. And this is a compound made up of the word pancha, which means 5, plus upadana, meaning clinging, and kanda, which usually is translated aggregates, but the sense of kanda from various usages, it can mean things like a heap, a mass, an accumulation. Okay, and so we have 5 of these, and the question is, what is the relation of clinging to the 5 upadana khandas? When we say that the 5 aggregates are here translated affected by clinging, so I use in more recent translations the 5 aggregates subject to clinging. The way I would understand this is that these are the 5 factors that make up the, let's say, the 5 constituents of experience, or the 5 constituents of the human individual, which are subject to clinging. The 5 types of phenomena that are the objective domain of clinging. And clinging is an attitude of holding onto. And the way I usually understand it, in terms of the holding, takes place in 2 ways. One way is what I call appropriation, which means appropriation means making one's property. So you can see that there's a connection, a verbal connection, between the word property and appropriate. So to appropriate something means you make it your property. And so clinging operates in regard to the 5 aggregates by taking hold of them and making them one's property. And when one makes them one's property, it means one conceives them as mine, that which I own, that which I possess, that which over which, and when you own something, you have you generally control over it. So the idea of the 5 aggregates as being mine suggests that I have control over them. And to have control means that you could mold them and shape them in any way you want, simply by a dictate of volition of the will. The other implication of holding or clinging to the 5 aggregates, I said one is appropriation. The other is identification, which means one takes something to be I, to be what I really am, and then with building that up a little more theoretically, then one takes the object of identification to be myself. This is the atta, the atman, the true innermost personal identity. And so the 5 aggregates, now the panchupadana kanda, the 5 aggregates of clinging, we could say are the 5 objects of appropriation and the 5 objects of identification. Or put very briefly and concisely, they are the 5 things that one takes to be mine, I, and myself. Okay, so now the monk enumerates the 5 aggregates, and we'll come to a more extensive explanation of them a little bit down below. And then the Buddha approves of his enumeration, and then the monk asks, in what are these 5 aggregates affected by clinging rooted? And then the Buddha says that these 5 aggregates affected by clinging are rooted in desire. And here the word used is not tanha but chanda, so it's a synonym of tanha or craving. Okay, so the sutta itself doesn't give any explanation of exactly what's meant by saying that the 5 aggregates are rooted in desire. But we might understand it maybe in 2 ways. One way is based on maybe the Buddha's teaching of dependent origination, paticca samuppada, which implies that these 5 aggregates come into being, or they arise at the moment of conception, the first moment of a new life. They come into being because of the desire, the force of desire that's been moving on from the previous life. That is when a being is in the process of dying. As long as in the stream of consciousness of that person or being who is dying, as long as there is desire or craving accompanied by ignorance, then that craving, when the life force is extinguished in the old body, the dying body, then the craving can no longer hold on to those 5 aggregates because now they've perished, no more vitality. But that craving becomes the seed for bringing into existence a new set of 5 aggregates at the moment of conception in the new life. So it's the desire or craving backed up by ignorance that gives rise to a new set of 5 aggregates which come into being at the moment of conception, and then they start to develop, mature, evolve, until the being takes birth into the world and then starts to grow and mature. And all of this is taking place because of that impulse of desire that had been transmitted from the old life to start the new life. So that's one way to understand how the 5 aggregates are rooted in desire. And then the other way is simply to see the relationship between desire and the 5 aggregates in terms of the present life. That it's desire which is constantly sort of motivating us, which means to motivate or move the 5 aggregates to engage in various activities in order to try to satisfy desire. Okay, now the monk asks the Buddha still another question. And this is a very subtle, very tricky question. So he says, is that clinging the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Or is the clinging something apart from, something separate from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Okay, then the Buddha, well, first let's just take a look at the question. Maybe first we'll take a look at the answer. Okay, so on the next page, 888, the Buddha says, "Monk, that clinging is neither the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging, nor is the clinging something apart from, separate from, removed from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. But it is the desire and lust, or the desire and attachment in regard to the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, that is the clinging there, that is the clinging to them." Okay, now, if you see the expression panchupadana kanda, and we just translate it very literally, the 5 clinging aggregates, then one might get the impression that the 5 aggregates themselves are all necessarily activities of clinging. So one would think, okay, even the physical body is an activity of clinging. Any kind of feeling is an activity of clinging. Any kind of perception is an activity of clinging. Any kind of volitional formations, any kind of consciousness. In that case, with clinging the same as the 5 aggregates, then the 5 aggregates become just expressions of clinging. But that's an alternative that the Buddha rejects. He says that's not the case. And if one says that there's clinging apart from the 5 aggregates, where is it? Floating around up in the ceiling? Is this my clinging? Maybe it's hiding in the flask, and when I open it, it jumps out and attaches to the 5 aggregates. Or maybe these 5 aggregates will be sitting in my room reading a book while my clinging goes out and takes a walk around the monastery. So that's not possible, is it? So the clinging has to be someplace within the 5 aggregates. And so where do we find it? The Buddha says, it is the desire and lust in regard to the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, that is the clinging there. And so the way we understand this is that it is the clinging consists in this desire and lust, which are just different names for the mental factor of craving or greed, that craving within the 5 aggregates, among the 5 aggregates, that is the clinging to them. And in the 5 aggregates, where do we find that desire and lust? Where does it exist? In the 5 aggregates. It's in one of the aggregates. Feeling? Somebody said volitional formations. Should we do a vote? And did I hear somebody say consciousness? Okay, we'll put these. How many votes for feeling? 3. 4? How many for consciousness? 1, 2, 3? No. That's cheating. How many for volitional formations? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did I get everybody? For volitional formations, put the hands up high, so I don't want to miss. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are only 13 people today, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. But I count 18 people. Who didn't vote? Raise your hands.
Something called the Fifth Amendment.
Maybe somebody thinks bodily form should be the clinging? No? Perception? Johnny votes for perception.
It may be interesting that ask which is not. Obviously, they just want to rule out one rule, a same as multiple rule.
Okay, let's see where Bhante votes. Feeling? That would seem to mean that if I'm feeling a pleasant feeling, that's clinging, right? Yeah, but it would seem that feeling is an object of clinging, right? If I'm feeling a pleasant feeling, it's not necessarily the case that I have to be clinging to it. What about the Buddha? He says that I live happily. So when he's feeling pleasure, then it would mean that he was having clinging. So it couldn't be feeling. Let's see, if it were consciousness with our same as clinging. Those who propose consciousness, are you saying every state of consciousness is a state of clinging? Who voted for consciousness? Nobody. Well, it would mean either some states of consciousness are states of clinging and some are not, or every state of consciousness is a state of clinging. If every state of consciousness is a state of clinging, then there couldn't be arahats because they're conscious, or if there were, they would have to be unconscious all the time. They would have to go into like a deep coma, and then you could say, okay, he's an arhat. But it doesn't sound very attractive, right? So certainly we could rule out the position that all consciousness is clinging. But some states of consciousness, some not. So which states are states of clinging? No clarification. So let's go to the aggregate of volitional formations.
Free will from the internet vote for volition formation.
Excuse me?
That free people vote for volition formation.
Oh, okay, so he increased the number to 9. And any interneters vote for the others?
No.
Okay. Now the volitional formations is a very wide group, if you remember. And so it includes wholesome factors, states like faith, mindfulness, samadhi, wisdom, generosity, loving kindness, compassion. Do you think those would qualify as clinging? Remember, clinging is the desire and lust within the 5 aggregates. So, Sandy, you're shaking your head, yes? So you think the good mental qualities like generosity, mindfulness, samadhi, faith, that they're clinging. Well, clinging is desire and lust, attachment. Well, this is the bad desire. What? Okay, now we have unwholesome mental factors also. What are some of the unwholesome mental factors? Greed, hatred, delusion, wrong views, conceit, laziness, restlessness. Maybe we'll find clinging there. How many think clinging will be found in the wholesome mental factors? And how many think clinging will be found in the unwholesome mental factors? Great majority. And my Pali expert here is not voting at all today. Okay, the volition, we're going to boost the number up to 10. I have to cast my vote. And here we have wholesome, neutral, and unwholesome. Certainly will agree with the unwholesome vote. And amongst the unwholesome factors, we have one of them is greed. And so it's greed that is the actual force behind clinging. And then greed goes very closely, in clinging, it goes very closely with wrong views. Because when there is the attachment to the 5 aggregates, then one gives rise to the view of the aggregates as being mine, I, and myself. Okay, so this is coming back now to that definition. It is the desire and lust in regard to the 5 aggregates subject to clinging that is the clinging there. So the desire and lust, these are just 2 terms for the mental factor of greed or craving, and those exist in the aggregate of volitional formations or volitional activities, and they take as their object any of the 5 aggregates. Okay, at this point, do they have to hit the... Yeah, I know, yeah. Okay, are there any questions now at this point? Okay, Chin has a question.
Ande, you mentioned before that when the being passing away,
Yeah.
at the moment of passing away, then it try to if the cleaning to because of the cleaning and ignorance, then it's looking forward. It's to try to grasp the existence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the next life
Yeah.
formed.
Yeah.
Now, where is that cleaning? Is this on the consciousness stream, or where?
Where is that clinging?
Yeah, where is the cleaning during that time? Because the consciousness, it's the formed,
Yeah.
perception,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
longer there.
The question is actually not very clearly raised within the old texts, the Nikayas, except in one sutta. It's a little sutta that comes in the Samyutta Nikaya. Let me see if I can remember where it is. I think it's Abhyakata Samyutta, which is chapter 44 in the Samyutta Nikaya. And it's not dealt with in any kind, it's just like one statement there, and I don't even remember the exact words. But so my understanding, I just explained my understanding, that what happens, say if it's a human being passing away who's going to take a human rebirth, that a very subtle type of 5 aggregates after the person passes away. So then the stream of consciousness exists in the form of a kind of subtle, very subtle type of 5 aggregates, that they're still existing in a kind of ethereal state. Because it's not necessarily the case that all of the karmic conditions conducive to a new birth will be present at the exact moment that the being passes away. And so this is my understanding of this is based on some accounts that I've read in the literature of people who have recollection of their past lives, not through a meditative experience, but just in some cases, the recollection occurs to them spontaneously. Often it's in the case of people who had died suddenly in youth, either in childhood or in youth. And so for some reason, because the consciousness maybe is strong at the time of their death, so some kind of memory carries over to the next life. And so they're able to describe what happened when they passed away, and they see they see themselves maybe as as they died, they see themselves sort of detaching from the physical body and floating around the room, and even looking down at their body lying dead on the deathbed, and they see the relatives gathering around and weeping. In one account that I read, the person who had died was trying to make contact with his relatives, but nobody paid any attention to him, except the family dog was barking. So the dog could sense the presence of some other being in the room, but not the human people. Okay, so I think the being then remains in this kind of, you call it a disembodied state, but there's a very subtle type of ethereal matter present, so they still see their bodies, and they still have a sense of themselves as continuing their old identity. And so they'll be, and then they can move, they don't have a clear sense of the passage of time, whether it's one day or 1 year. They don't have a clear sense of that. They find themselves able to move over great distances of space very quickly. And then at some point they find themselves attracted to a particular couple, drawn to a particular couple, and then they'll hang around the house until the man and the woman have sexual relationship. And then at that moment, then they lose the sense of continuous consciousness until they find themselves coming out from the womb. And then as they regain, as they mature in their new identity, then they have some memory comes back to them of what happened at the end of the previous life and in that intermediate period. Does that answer the question?
First part, I have
Yeah.
second part. How about arahant?
Yeah, for an arhat, there's no continuity of the consciousness beyond death.
Okay. The subtle five aggregates.
Yeah.
What are the main part? Like we vote there, right? Which one will be the main part that triggers the beings to take the form of human being? Are they volitional formation, or are they consciousness, or are they mixed?
Yeah,
Anyone
what would
stands
lead
out
back
more?
to the human realm would be the karmic accumulations that are conducive to a human life. And so the karma would be coming out of the aggregate of volitional formations. Because Chaitana, volition, is the main factor amongst the volitional formations. Okay, Suki has a question.
I'm not certain about your answer to your question yet. You asked where is clinging, and then you asked, we quoted like a feeling.
I'm not really hearing very well. Maybe put the
Okay.
microphone closer to me.
You asked questions about where clinging is, like
Yeah.
feeling, consciousness, and volitional formation.
Yeah.
And everybody voted.
Yeah.
And I didn't exactly hear your answer.
Oh, you didn't understand my answer. Or
Right.
didn't hear it well.
Right.
Okay, the answer is that clinging is the mental factor of greed or craving, which is one of the unwholesome mental factors in the aggregate of volitional formations.
That I understand. But so, I thought none of those, because of, it could, the five aggregates, when you're arhan, you don't have clinging, right?
Yeah,
So it's not a matter of which part of five aggregates there is a clinging.
Yeah.
It's a matter of what state. So you could, all of those could have clinging if you're not arhan.
no,
No, it's not that?
No,
Oh.
no, because that would mean that that clinging is the five aggregates themselves. What's true is that all five aggregates can become objects of clinging. That's why it's called the five aggregates affected by clinging,
Right.
or the five aggregates subject to clinging. Because one clings to form, one clings to feeling, one clings to perception, one clings to volitions themselves, one clings to consciousness. So all five are objects of clinging, but the clinging itself is a factor or a couple of factors in the aggregate of volitional activities.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I think we should go on now. Okay, so now the monk asks the Buddha whether there can be diversity in the desire and lust regarding these five aggregates. And so the Buddha says there can be, and he says, here someone thinks thus, may my material form be such and such in the future, may my feeling be such and such, perception, may my volitional formations, may my consciousness be such and such in the future. And so in this way, there is diversity in the desire and lust regarding the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. So this means that the diversity comes because there are 5 aggregates. Maybe at least we could say there are 2 ways there can be diversity. First, because the 5 aggregates themselves are diverse or different. So one can wish for one aggregate to be different, form, or feeling, or perception, the formations, or consciousness. So because the 5 aggregates are different, when one wishes them to change, each one to change in a particular way, then that is one aspect of the diversity. The second aspect is that one can wish for any of the aggregates to be different in a variety of ways. Now I'm a man, so I might wish, say in the future, maybe in a future life, may I become a woman in the future. Or I might wish, may I be Chinese in the future. May I be Thai in the future. May I be Mexican in the future. May I be French in the future. So I can wish for a whole variety of ways. May I have blue eyes, or may I have blonde hair, blue eyes and blonde hair in the future. Or may I have black hair and almond-shaped eyes, brown almond-shaped eyes.